One son shot himself in the head, unable to live without an empire. Another joined the Nazi Party and pulled the trigger in a political execution, murdering a communist on Hitler's orders. The heir to the German throne sat beside the Führer at ceremonies, sent him fawning letters, secured him 2 million votes, then refused to help assassinate him when conspirators came begging. One prince participated in Kristallnacht and never expressed remorse, dying with Nazi beliefs intact. Another disappeared entirely, changing his name and vanishing into Switzerland to escape the impossible choice. And one princess outlived them all, watching her grandson become king of Spain while her family fought a 10-year legal battle over whether their Nazi collaboration was substantial enough to disqualify them from 1.2 million euros in compensation and the return of the imperial crown. This is what happened to Kaiser Wilhelm II's 7 children, and why the choices they made during history's darkest chapter still haunt Germany today. It is the morning of June 4th, 1941. In a Dutch manor house called House Dawn, surrounded by German soldiers, Kaiser Wilhelm II takes his final breath. He is outside. Nazi officers wait with swastika flags, ready to claim the body of the last German emperor for a propaganda funeral in Berlin. But Wilhelm's will is explicit and unbreakable. His remains shall not return to Germany unless the monarchy is restored. He dies as he lived his final 23 years, in exile, surrounded by furniture from a vanished world, dreaming of a throne he will never reclaim. For 30 years, Wilhelm ruled 65 million people. He commanded the second largest navy on earth. His dynasty, the Hohenzollerns, had governed Prussia for 5 centuries, accumulating power that rivaled the Romanovs, the Habsburgs, the British crown itself. Now he dies in a house he purchased with the remnants of imperial wealth, guarded by soldiers of a regime he privately called a bunch of shirted gangsters. The man who once held supreme power over an empire now cannot even control where his own body will be buried. But Wilhelm's death did not end the Hohenzollern story. It merely passed the burden to the 7 children he left behind. Born to inherit an empire, these princes and one princess instead inherited exile, disgrace, and an impossible choice: whether to embrace the Nazi regime that promised restoration, or reject it and fade into obscurity. One son had already made his choice 2 decades earlier. He killed himself, unable to bear the loss of everything he was born to expect. His body was found with a bullet through his head at age 29. His father's reaction was not grief but fury. He should have done this to us, especially to his mother. Another son would join the Nazi Party on April 1st, 1930, receiving membership number 246,268, symbolically adjusted to appear early to honor his royal status. He would rise to SA Obergruppenführer, the second highest rank in Hitler's paramilitary thugs. He would participate in an extrajudicial execution, pulling the trigger on a communist prisoner. He would defend Kristallnacht when Nazi mobs destroyed Jewish businesses across Germany. And when his father confronted him, the old Kaiser would say, for the first time in his life, "I am ashamed to be a German." The heir to the throne made a different calculation. Crown Prince Wilhelm courted Hitler, believed the Nazis would restore him to power, sat in places of honor at their ceremonies. Then, in 1944, when military officers plotting to assassinate the Führer came to him for support, when they offered him a role in post-Nazi Germany, when they gave him the chance to help end the nightmare, he refused. Whether from cowardice, cynicism, or residual loyalty, he would not join them. And on July 20th, 1944, when the assassination attempt failed and the Gestapo hunted down every conspirator, the Crown Prince who had refused to help was merely placed under surveillance. He survived. The men who asked for his help did not. The Hohenzollerns had ruled Prussia since 1415. For over 500 years, the family accumulated power, territory, and prestige, transforming a minor German state into the dominant force in Central Europe. In 1871, Wilhelm's grandfather, Wilhelm I, and his chancellor, Otto von Bismarck, united the German states into a single empire, with the Prussian king as German emperor. The Hohenzollern stood at the pinnacle of European power, rivaled only by the Romanovs of Russia, the Habsburgs of Austria-Hungary, and the British crown. Wilhelm II inherited this empire in 1888, the year of 3 emperors. His grandfather Wilhelm I died in March. His father, Friedrich III, already dying of throat cancer, survived only 99 days on the throne. Wilhelm became emperor at 29, inheriting both supreme power and supreme expectations. He dismissed Bismarck within 2 years, convinced he could rule alone. He pursued aggressive expansion, building a massive navy to rival Britain's, seeking colonies in Africa and the Pacific, taking a diplomatic posture that managed to alarm France, Russia, and Britain simultaneously. His personality was erratic, his public statements often disastrous, his judgment questionable. But he was the Kaiser, and his word was law. Wilhelm married Princess Augusta Victoria of Schleswig-Holstein in 1881. Together they had 7 children, 6 sons and 1 daughter. Crown Prince Friedrich Wilhelm, born in 1882, was the heir apparent. Prince Eitel Friedrich, born in 1883, was the second son, a military man destined to earn Prussia's highest honor for valor. Prince Adalbert, born in 1884, joined the navy and commanded destroyers. Prince August Wilhelm, born in 1887 and known as Aui, was the 4th son, charming but impressionable, the one who would become a Nazi true believer. Prince Oscar, born in 1888, would cause scandal by marrying a countess rather than a princess. Prince Joachim, born in 1890, was the youngest son, sensitive, troubled, the one who couldn't survive what was coming. And Princess Victoria Louise, born in 1892, was the only daughter and her father's undisputed favorite, destined to outlive them all and watch her grandson become King of Spain. The children grew up in the Neues Palais in Potsdam, a Baroque palace of 200 rooms where Frederick the Great had once held court. They spent winters at the Berlin Stadtschloss, the official imperial residence, with its 1,200 rooms overlooking the Spree River. Theirs was a world of uniforms and ceremonies, tutors and military drills, state banquets and dynastic expectations. The sons were commissioned as officers almost from birth. The daughter was groomed for a strategic marriage that would bind another royal house to the Hohenzollern cause. By 1914, Germany was the industrial powerhouse of Europe, leading the world in steel production, chemical manufacturing, and engineering. The army was the strongest on the continent. The navy had grown to challenge British supremacy at sea. But Germany was also encircled by enemies. France had never forgiven the humiliation of 1871. Russia was bound to France by alliance. Britain watched the growing German fleet with alarm. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, triggered a chain of alliances and ultimatums. By August, Europe was at war. The conflict that was supposed to end by Christmas lasted 4 years and killed 17 million people. Even the mightiest empire can collapse in a matter of days. And when it did, the children of the Kaiser would discover that royal blood could be both a refuge and a death sentence. The German Empire did not fall on the battlefield. It fell in the streets. On November 3, 1918, sailors at the Kiel naval base mutinied rather than sail out for a final suicidal battle against the British fleet. Within days, the revolution spread to Hamburg, Munich, Berlin. Workers' and soldiers' councils seized power in city after city. On November 9, 1918, Chancellor Prince Max von Baden announced the Kaiser's abdication without Wilhelm's consent. That same afternoon, Social Democrat Philipp Scheidemann proclaimed the German Republic from a window of the Reichstag. Wilhelm learned of his own abdication from the newspapers. The Kaiser fled on November 10, 1918. His train crossed into the Netherlands. Queen Wilhelmina granted him asylum despite Allied demands for his extradition to face trial as a war criminal. Wilhelm would never return to Germany. He signed the formal abdication documents on November 28th, ending 500 years of Hohenzollern rule over Prussia. First, he stayed at Amerongen Castle, then purchased Hohenzollern near Utrecht for 500,000 guilders. 59 railway carriages transported furniture, art, silver, and imperial treasures from Berlin and Potsdam palaces to his new home. He would spend the remaining 23 years of his life chopping wood, feeding ducks, and dreaming of restoration. The first of the Kaiser's children to die was the youngest son, and he did not wait to see how the story would unfold. Prince Joachim was fragile from the start. He had always been the sensitive one, the one who struggled with the rigid expectations of Hohenzollern manhood. In 1916, he married Princess Marie of Anhalt. The marriage was troubled from the beginning. In May 1918, a psychiatric examination concluded that Joachim was incurably ill, both mentally and physically, prone to violent, uncontrollably exploding outbursts of anger in which all self-control was lost. When the empire fell, whatever stability Joachim had managed to maintain fell with it. His wife left him. She filed for divorce. There were reports that he had beaten her. By 1920, Joachim was living at Villa Liegnitz in Sanssouci Park, Potsdam, the same park where his ancestors had built their greatest palaces, now a reminder of everything he had lost. He was 29 years old. He had a 4-year-old son he rarely saw. He had no role, no purpose, no future he could imagine. On the evening of July 18, 1920, Joachim shot himself with a revolver. His brother, August Wilhelm, found him and rushed him to St. Joseph Hospital in Potsdam. He died shortly after arrival. His suicide ended a life that had already been unmade. The Kaiser's reaction was not grief but fury. He exclaimed that he should have done this to us, and especially to his mother. The callousness was characteristic, but the concern for the Empress was warranted. Augusta Victoria had already been weakened by exile and the loss of everything she had known. Her youngest son's suicide broke something in her. She never recovered. Less than a year later, on April 11, 1921, the Empress died at Hohenzollern. Wilhelm remarried within 18 months to Princess Hermine Reuss of Greiz, a marriage that scandalized his children and delighted no one. Joachim left behind one son, Prince Karl Franz Joseph, born in 1916. That boy would grow up, marry, have children of his own. His great-grandson, Grand Duke George Mikhailovich of Russia, born in 1981, is today a claimant to the Russian imperial throne. The bloodline of the prince who could not bear to live continued through generations he never knew. Crown Prince Wilhelm returned to Germany on November 9, 1923, deliberately choosing the 5th anniversary of the revolution, a symbolic gesture of defiance that infuriated his father. He settled at Cecilienhof Palace in Potsdam with his wife Cecilia and their children. The Crown Prince had commanded the 5th Army during the war. He had ordered the opening bombardment at Verdun on February 21, 1916, earning the grim nickname Butcher of Verdun for the 700,000 casualties that followed. Now he was a man without a throne, but not without ambitions. The Crown Prince's relationship with the Nazi movement was documented extensively, and those documents would matter greatly 80 years later when his descendants sought compensation from the German government. Hitler visited Cecilienhof at least 3 times. In 1926, at the Day of Potsdam on March 21st, 1933, and again in 1935. The Day of Potsdam was a masterpiece of Nazi propaganda. Hitler needed legitimacy from conservative elites. The Crown Prince provided it. He sat in a place of honor with his family behind an empty chair that symbolized the absent Kaiser. When Hitler entered the garrison church, he walked directly to the Crown Prince and saluted. The message was clear. The new Germany honored the old. The Crown Prince later boasted of securing 2 million votes for Hitler. In 1933 and 1934, he wrote articles for the New York Herald Tribune defending the Nazi regime and blaming Germany's problems on Marxists and Jews. He sent fawning letters to Hitler. He believed, or convinced himself, that the Nazis would eventually restore the monarchy with him on the throne. But the Crown Prince never formally joined the Nazi Party. This distinction would matter later, legally if not morally. His enthusiasm cooled after the Night of the Long Knives. On June 30th, 1934, Hitler purged the SA leadership and settled old scores. Among the dead was Kurt von Schleicher, the former Chancellor who had been a friend of the Crown Prince. The murder shocked Wilhelm into political withdrawal. He began to understand that Hitler had no intention of restoring anyone. The Nazis wanted power for themselves, not for the Hohenzollerns. In May 1940, the Crown Prince's eldest son, Prince Wilhelm, was killed in France during the German invasion. He was 34 years old. His funeral in Potsdam drew over 50,000 mourners, a spontaneous outpouring of monarchist sentiment that alarmed the Nazi leadership. Hitler responded by banning all Hohenzollern princes from military service. They were too popular. They were a threat. After the Kaiser's death in June 1941, the Crown Prince became the titular head of the House of Hohenzollern. And then came the moment that would define his legacy. In the years that followed, as the war turned against Germany, military officers and diplomats began plotting to overthrow Hitler. They approached the Crown Prince. They wanted him to serve as a figurehead for a post-Nazi government, someone with legitimacy who could negotiate with the Allies. The Crown Prince refused. Whether from cowardice, cynicism, or residual loyalty to the regime that had courted him, he would not join the conspiracy. On July 20th, 1944, the plotters tried to kill Hitler anyway. They failed. The Gestapo hunted down everyone connected to the conspiracy. The Crown Prince, who had refused to participate, was placed under surveillance but not arrested. After the war, the Allied denazification process classified the Crown Prince as a Mitläufer, a follower, not an active perpetrator. It was a lenient verdict for a man who had lent his prestige to the Nazi cause at critical moments. He spent his final years in a small 5-room house in Heckingen, far from the palaces of his youth. On July 20th, 1951, exactly 7 years after the assassination attempt he had refused to support, the Crown Prince died of a heart attack. He was 68 years old. While the Crown Prince collaborated without fully committing, his younger brother August Wilhelm embraced Nazism with true believer fervour. Nicknamed Owie, he was the 4th son, the one contemporaries described as charming but easily led. On April 1st, 1930, he joined the Nazi Party. His membership number was 246,268, symbolically low to honour his royal status. In November 1931, he joined the SA, the Nazi paramilitary force. He rose through the ranks to SA Obergruppenführer, the second highest SA rank, equivalent to a lieutenant general. In March 1933, he was elected to the Reichstag as a Nazi deputy. Hermann Göring appointed him to the Prussian State Council. The Nazis valued August Wilhelm precisely because he was a prince. His presence at rallies, his speeches endorsing Hitler, his uniformed figure beside the Führer, all of it told conservative Germans that the Nazi movement was respectable, that supporting Hitler did not mean abandoning tradition. Joseph Goebbels privately called him a good-natured but slightly gormless boy. The French ambassador dubbed him Heini. Left-wing newspapers nicknamed him Little Brown Shirt Owie. He accompanied Hitler on campaign flights in 1932, assuring crowds that Hitler was not a threat, but a benefactor of the German people. The most damning evidence against August Wilhelm emerged decades later. A 1960s investigation identified him as one of those that pulled the trigger in the extrajudicial execution of Albrecht Höhler on September 20th, 1933. Höhler was a communist who had killed Horst Wessel, the SA man the Nazis had martyred in song and propaganda. August Wilhelm participated in his murder. A prince of the House of Hohenzollern had become a killer for the Nazi cause. His father was horrified. The Kaiser had initially hoped the Nazis might restore the monarchy, but as their true nature became clear, he recoiled. When August Wilhelm defended Kristallnacht, the November 1938 pogrom in which Nazi mobs destroyed Jewish businesses and synagogues across Germany, the Kaiser effectively disowned him. Wilhelm told his son that, "For the first time, I am ashamed to be a German." He called Hitler's followers a bunch of shirted gangsters. The father who had dreamed of restoration now watched his son become a uniformed thug. American forces arrested August Wilhelm on May 8, 1945, the day Germany surrendered. At his 1948 denazification trial, the prosecutor asked if he had repudiated National Socialism. August Wilhelm replied, "I beg your pardon?" He was classified as Belastete, incriminated activist, the harshest category for those who had actively supported the regime. The tribunal sentenced him to 2.5 years of hard labor, then released him immediately for time already served in detention. On March 25, 1949, August Wilhelm died of lung cancer in Stuttgart. He was 61 years old. He never expressed remorse. Not all of the Kaiser's sons chose collaboration or extremism. Prince Eitel Friedrich, the second son, became the family's quiet dissenter. He had been a decorated combat commander in the war, earning the Pour le Mérite, Prussia's highest honor for valor. He attended the 1931 Harzburg Front Rally, a gathering of conservative nationalists opposed to the Weimar Republic. But this was monarchism, not Nazism. Unlike his brothers, Eitel Friedrich spoke out against Hitler. He refused to lend his name or presence to Nazi events. He remained in Germany throughout the regime's 12 years, but he did not bend. On December 8, 1942, Eitel Friedrich died of a stroke. He was 59 years old. The Nazi response to his death revealed everything about their relationship. The regime refused to allow military honors at his funeral. Attendees were forbidden from wearing uniforms. The Pour le Mérite hero, the prince who had fought for Germany in its greatest war, was denied the ceremonies that any ordinary officer would have received. He had refused to serve the new order, and the new order repaid him with contempt. Prince Adalbert, the third son, chose a different path: disappearance. A naval officer who had commanded destroyers in the war, Adalbert moved to Switzerland in 1928. He adopted the pseudonym Count von Lingen and deliberately severed ties with German politics. He avoided the exiled court at Hohenzollern. He took no part in Nazi-era events. He wanted nothing to do with the impossible choices his siblings faced. In 1948, Adalbert died in La Tour de Pale, Switzerland. He was 63 years old. History largely forgot him, which was precisely what he wanted. Prince Oscar, the fifth son, walked a middle path. His 1914 marriage to Countess Ina Marie von Bassewitz had scandalized the court. She was noble but not royal, making it a morganatic marriage that initially enraged the Kaiser. Eventually, Wilhelm relented, and Oscar and Ina had 4 children. Like Eitel Friedrich, Oscar attended the 1931 Harzburg Front Rally. He briefly held a Wehrmacht commission in 1940, but his primary concern during the Nazi years was protecting the Johanniter Orden, the Order of St. John, from Nazi cultural purges. The regime wanted to absorb or eliminate independent organizations. Oscar worked to preserve the order's autonomy, which fostered quiet anti-Nazi sentiment among its members. The war took Oscar's son in September 1939, Prince Oscar Wilhelm Karl Hans Kuno, killed in Poland at 24. Then, in May 1940, his nephew Wilhelm was killed in France. After these deaths, the Nazi regime cancelled most royal military commissions. The Hohenzollerns were too popular, too dangerous as symbols of an alternative Germany. Oscar lived quietly through the war and its aftermath. On January 27, 1958, he died of stomach cancer in Munich. He was 69 years old, the last surviving son of Kaiser Wilhelm II. Princess Victoria Louise outlived them all. The only daughter, her father's favourite, she witnessed the full arc of the 20th century, from imperial splendour through 2 world wars to the divided Germany of the Cold War. Her wedding on May 24, 1913, to Prince Ernst August of Hanover, was the last great gathering of European royalty before everything fell apart. The marriage healed a rift of 47 years between the houses of Hohenzollern and Hanover, dating to Prussia's 1866 annexation of the Kingdom of Hanover. King George V of Britain attended. So did Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. Both were cousins of both the bride and the groom. More than 1,200 guests filled Berlin for the celebrations. Within 14 months, these royal cousins would be at war. Within 5 years, Nicholas would be dead in a cellar in Ekaterinburg, and the German and Austro-Hungarian empires would be gone. Ernst August became Duke of Brunswick in November 1913. He abdicated 5 years later, along with every other German monarch. He and Victoria Louise settled into a reduced but comfortable existence, moving between properties in Austria and Germany. Neither joined the Nazi Party, though they donated funds to the regime, a common aristocratic hedge, hoping the Nazis might restore the monarchies they had lost. Victoria Louise refused Hitler's request to arrange a marriage between her daughter Frederica and the Prince of Wales, the future Edward VIII. She cited the age difference, but the refusal itself took courage. On June 4, 1941, Victoria Louise was at her father's bedside when he died at Hohenzollern. She watched Nazi officers arrive with their flags and heard them discuss plans for a state funeral the Kaiser had forbidden. Victoria Louisa and Ernst August faced a war's end. Victoria Louisa and Ernst August faced a new threat. Their castle at Blankenburg lay in the zone that would become East Germany. Soviet occupation meant the loss of everything. But Victoria Louise had a cousin, King George VI of Britain. The king personally ordered British Army trucks to rescue their possessions and transport them to Marienburg Castle in the British zone. Royal blood still counted for something, even in the ruins of 1945. Victoria Louise's descendants connect the Hohenzollerns to reigning European royalty today. Her daughter, Princess Frederica, married King Paul of Greece and became Queen of the Hellenes from 1947 to 1964. Her granddaughter, Queen Sophia of Spain, born in 1938, is the mother of King Felipe VI, who currently sits on the Spanish throne. Her grandson, King Constantine II of Greece, was the last Greek monarch before the 1974 referendum abolished the monarchy. He died in 2023. Her grandson, Prince Ernst August V of Hanover, is the current head of the House of Hanover and is married to Princess Caroline of Monaco. Through Victoria Louise, the blood of Kaiser Wilhelm II flows in the veins of a reigning European king. Victoria Louise died on December 11, 1980, in Braunschweig, Germany. She was 88 years old. She had been born an imperial princess in a world of emperors, kaisers, and tsars. She died in a divided Germany, her granddaughter a queen of Spain, her great-grandson heir to the Spanish throne. The current head of the House of Hohenzollern is Georg Friedrich, Prince of Prussia, born on June 10, 1976. He became head of the family on September 26, 1994, at age 18, following the death of his grandfather, Louis Ferdinand. His father had died in a Bundeswehr training accident when Georg Friedrich was barely a year old. He grew up without a father, heir to a dynasty without a throne. Georg Friedrich studied business economics at the University of Freiburg and served with Bundeswehr Alpine troops, rising to major in the reserve. In 2011, he married Princess Sophie of Eisenberg at the Church of Peace in Potsdam, the same church where Crown Prince Wilhelm had been christened over a century before. They have 4 children, twin sons Karl Friedrich and Louis Ferdinand, born in 2013, a daughter Emma, born in 2015, and a son Heinrich, born in 2016. Georg Friedrich moved his family from Bremen to Potsdam in 2018. He now runs a beer company called Königlich Preußisches Bier Manufaktur, producing a Pilsner under the Prussian royal brand. But Georg Friedrich's life has been defined less by beer than by a legal battle that consumed German public attention for over a decade. When Soviet forces occupied Eastern Germany in 1945, they expropriated all landowners and industrialists. The Hohenzollerns lost, in the family's own words, by far the majority of their wealth. Palaces, estates, art collections, libraries, all of it seized. The Stadtschloss Palace in Berlin was demolished by East Germany in 1959. Properties in Silesia were taken by Poland. The Dutch government seized Heusdorn after German reunification. A 1994 law allowed families to seek compensation for Soviet-era expropriations, with one crucial exception. Compensation would be denied if ancestors had provided substantial support to the Nazi regime. That exception became the central battleground of the Hohenzollern claims. In 2014, Georg Friedrich began formal negotiations with the federal government and the states of Berlin and Brandenburg. The family sought permanent residence rights in Sicilienhof Palace, the return of the family library, 266 paintings, thousands of additional artworks and antiquities, the imperial crown and scepter, letters of Empress Augusta Victoria, and 1.2 million euros in cash compensation. When details of the negotiations leaked in mid-2019, public outrage erupted. The satirist Jan Böhmermann dubbed Georg Friedrich Prince Dum-Dum and published confidential expert reports on the family's Nazi ties. The left-wing party Die Linke launched a petition titled "No Gifts for the Hohenzollerns." The family made matters worse by filing over 80 lawsuits against historians, journalists, and media outlets covering the dispute. Public sympathy evaporated. Historians remain divided on the central question. Stefan Malinowski argued that Crown Prince Wilhelm had provided substantial support to the Nazi rise. Christopher Clark initially called the Crown Prince insignificant to Hitler's success. Wolfram Peter claimed Wilhelm had actually tried to sabotage the Nazis. The debate intensified after an unrelated incident in December 2022, when police arrested members of the Reichsbürger movement, extremists who deny the legitimacy of the modern German state, for plotting a coup. The association between former nobility and anti-democratic sentiment, however unfair to the Hohenzollerns specifically, poisoned the public atmosphere. On March 9, 2023, Georg Friedrich withdrew all 80 lawsuits, stating he hoped this would open the way for an unencumbered historical debate about his family's 20th century role. Negotiations resumed in autumn 2024. On May 12, 2025, the parties announced a landmark settlement at Sanssouci Palace. A new foundation, the Stiftung Hohenzollern Kunstbesitz, was created with a 9-member board, 6 representatives from public authorities and 3 from the Hohenzollern family. Approximately 27,000 objects were transferred to the foundation and will remain in their current museum locations. The family dropped most financial claims. In exchange, they retained 7 decorated tobacco boxes, certain items on a negotiated list, and gained representation on the foundation board. Then, on December 31, 2025, Karl Friedrich, Prince of Hohenzollern, head of the Catholic Swabian branch and owner of 1/3 of Hohenzollern Castle, transferred his share to Georg Friedrich. For the first time in modern history, the Prussian Hohenzollerns own 100% of their ancestral castle. Georg Friedrich, the prince who runs a beer company and serves as a trustee of the Marga Friedlander Foundation supporting Holocaust education, now presides over a tourist attraction rather than a seat of power. The settlement resolved the legal question, but not the historical one. Did Crown Prince Wilhelm substantially support the Nazi regime? Historians will continue to debate. What the documents show is a man who lent his prestige to Hitler at critical moments, who sat in a place of honor while the dictator consolidated power, who later refused to join the conspiracy that might have ended the nightmare early. His brother, August Wilhelm, went further, joining the party, wearing the uniform, pulling the trigger. Their choices shaped not just their own fates, but their descendants' claims a century later. The Hohenzollerns were not the only dynasty to face these impossible choices. When the Kaiser fled to Holland in November 1918, Tsar Nicholas II had already been dead for 4 months, executed with his entire family in a basement in Yekaterinburg. The Romanov children, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and Alexei, died with their parents. But the extended families scattered across Europe, and their descendants still walk among us today. In Vienna, the Habsburgs watched their 600-year empire dissolve. Emperor Franz Joseph's heirs were stripped of their throne and banished from Austrian soil for decades. If you want to know what happened to the Romanovs, who survived the revolution, watch this video. And if you want to know the fate of the Habsburg bloodline after Franz Joseph's death, watch this one.